My son died 8 years ago. At least, that's what I believed. Every January, I transferred $50,000 into my daughter-in-law's bank account without missing a single year. I never asked for receipts. I never questioned where the money went, because I made a promise to my son on the last day I ever saw him alive. Take care of Ethan if anything ever happens to me. So I did. I thought I was helping my grandson build a future. Instead, I was paying for the biggest lie of my life. Everything changed on a cold Saturday afternoon. My 10-year-old grandson slipped a folded envelope into my coat pocket while his mother wasn't looking. His tiny hands were shaking. He looked me straight in the eyes and whispered, "Grandpa, don't open it here." Then he walked away like nothing had happened. That little envelope destroyed everything I thought I knew about my family. Before I tell you what was inside, let me tell you how I got there. My name is Richard Bennett. I'm 71 years old. For the past 42 years, I've owned a small hardware store in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. Nothing fancy. Just a family business where people still know each other's names. My wife, Margaret, used to say the store wasn't our job. It was our second home. She passed away 5 years ago after battling cancer. But losing Margaret wasn't the first time grief nearly destroyed me. That happened 3 years earlier, when my only son, Daniel, died. Daniel was 36. He was smart, and somehow managed to make everyone around him feel important. He became a firefighter because, in his words, "Dad, some people build things. I want to save them." He married Olivia when they were both 28. 2 years later, my grandson Ethan was born. Life finally felt complete. Sunday dinners, family vacations, birthdays, Christmas mornings. The kind of memories you think will last forever. Until one phone call erased everything. 8 years ago, my phone rang at 2:17 in the morning. A state trooper told me Daniel's truck had gone off Highway 30 during a snowstorm. The vehicle rolled into a ravine. It caught fire before emergency crews arrived. The body was too badly burned to identify visually. Dental records confirmed it was Daniel. The funeral was closed casket. I never saw my son's face again. No father should have to bury his child. But I did. Or at least I believed I did. After Daniel's funeral, Olivia looked completely broken. She cried constantly. She could barely take care of herself, let alone raise a 2-year-old little boy. I couldn't imagine what she was going through. So I made a decision. Every January, I wired her $50,000. Not because she asked. Because I wanted Ethan to have every opportunity Daniel would have wanted for him. Private school, college, medical care, a secure future. Whenever I asked if she needed anything else, she always smiled politely. "We're doing fine, Richard." That was her favorite sentence. "We're doing fine." Over the years, something slowly changed. Olivia became harder to reach. She canceled family dinners, skipped holidays, always had an excuse. "Ethan has soccer practice. We're visiting friends. He's not feeling well. Maybe next month." Eventually, I only saw my grandson once every few weeks. Always for a few hours. Never overnight. Never at my house. I blamed grief. People heal differently. That's what I kept telling myself. Then Ethan turned 10. He wasn't the happy little boy I remembered. He barely smiled anymore. Every time Olivia's phone buzzed, he flinched. Every time she raised her voice, he became completely silent. I noticed, but I convinced myself I was imagining things. Until last Saturday, we met at our usual place, Maple Grove Park, the same park where Daniel taught Ethan how to throw a baseball. Olivia stayed in the parking lot talking on her phone while Ethan and I walked toward the lake. We bought hot chocolate, fed the ducks, talked about school. For a few minutes, everything felt normal. Then Ethan suddenly stopped walking. He looked behind him to make sure his mother couldn't see us. His voice dropped to almost a whisper. "Grandpa, do you still send Mom money every year?" The question caught me completely off guard. I smiled. "Yes. It's for you. For your future." He looked down at the frozen ground. Then something happened that made my heart sink. Tears filled his eyes. "Please. Don't send her any more money. I froze. What do you mean? He swallowed hard, then reached into his backpack, pulled out a small white envelope. There was no stamp, no address, just one word written across the front in black ink. Grandpa. He pushed it into my hands. His fingers were trembling. Don't let Mom see this. Before I could ask another question, Olivia called from across the parking lot. Ethan. Time to go. He stepped backward, looked at me one last time, and whispered words I'll never forget. Dad wanted you to have it. Then he ran to the car. I stood there, holding an envelope that supposedly came from a man who had died 8 years earlier. And for the first time since my son's funeral, I began to wonder. I didn't open the envelope at the park. My hands wanted to. My heart begged me to. But Ethan's words echoed in my head. Don't open it here. I slipped it inside my coat and watched Olivia's SUV disappear down the road. For a long moment, I stood alone beside the frozen lake. Something wasn't right. I had spent 8 years believing my family was healing. Now, a 10-year-old boy had just risked getting caught to secretly hand me a letter. Children don't do that unless they're scared. The drive home felt longer than usual. Snow covered the fields outside Lancaster. Christmas decorations still hung on a few houses even though January was nearly over. Normally I enjoyed quiet drives. Not this one. Every mile filled my mind with questions. Why would Ethan hide a letter? Who wrote it? Why couldn't Olivia know about it? By the time I pulled into my driveway, my hands were already shaking. My house had been quiet ever since Margaret passed away. Some nights I still expected to hear her humming in the kitchen. Instead, there was only silence. I hung my coat by the door, made myself a cup of black coffee, then carried the envelope to the dining room table. For nearly 5 minutes, I simply stared at it. The handwriting looked familiar, painfully familiar. I opened the top drawer beside me. Inside were old birthday cards Daniel had written over the years. One from my 65th birthday. Another from Father's Day. I placed the card beside the envelope. My stomach tightened. The handwriting matched. Not perfectly, but close enough that my heart skipped a beat. Slowly, I opened the envelope. Inside was a single folded sheet of paper. No date, no signature. Just one sentence written across the top. Dad, if you're reading this, it means I never got the chance to tell you the truth. I stopped breathing. For several seconds, I couldn't move. This couldn't be possible. Daniel had been dead for 8 years. Hadn't he? I forced myself to keep reading. If anything ever happens to me, don't trust everything you're told. Protect Ethan. The answers are inside the blue toolbox. Please don't tell Olivia until you know the whole truth. That was it. 5 sentences. Nothing more. No explanation. No goodbye. Just a warning. The blue toolbox. I knew exactly what he meant. When Daniel was 16, we built a wooden workbench together in my garage. Underneath it sat an old blue steel toolbox he'd used for years. Even after getting married, he refused to throw it away. Dad, he'd laugh, every mechanic has one toolbox they never replace. After the funeral, Olivia had packed up most of Daniel's belongings. Furniture, clothes, pictures. But she told me she didn't want the old toolbox. So I kept it. It was still sitting exactly where Daniel left it. Covered in dust. Untouched for 8 years. I walked into the garage. Cold air filled the room. The toolbox sat beneath the workbench. Blue paint chipped. Rust around the handle. Exactly as I remembered. For a second, I hesitated. Opening it felt wrong. Like disturbing something sacred. But Daniel's words pushed me forward. The answers are inside. I unlocked the rusty latch. The lid creaked open. Inside were ordinary tools. Socket wrenches. Screwdrivers. A tape measure. Nothing unusual. I almost laughed. Maybe grief was making me imagine things. I noticed something strange. The bottom of the toolbox seemed thicker than it should. I ran my fingers along the metal. There was a small groove. Barely visible. I pressed it. A false bottom lifted open. My pulse exploded. Inside was a small waterproof pouch. I carried it back inside before opening it. Whatever was in there, Daniel had hidden it carefully. Inside the pouch were 3 things: a USB flash drive, a folded insurance document, and a photograph. I picked up the picture first. The moment I saw it, my blood ran cold. It showed Daniel standing beside another man. Both were wearing work jackets. Both were smiling. Nothing unusual, except for one detail. The photo had been taken 3 days after the date Daniel supposedly died. I checked the timestamp twice. Then a third time. Impossible. I looked closer. The date was printed automatically by the camera. March 18th. Daniel's funeral had been held on March 16th. I felt dizzy. No. I whispered. This can't be real. I grabbed the insurance paper. It wasn't life insurance. It was a policy cancellation notice. The signature at the bottom wasn't Daniel's. It was Olivia's. And the date was 2 weeks before the accident. Why would someone cancel a policy just before a fatal crash? Nothing made sense anymore. Finally, I picked up the USB drive. There was a small white label attached to it. Only 2 words. Watch first. I hurried into my study and plugged it into my computer. One video file appeared. No title. No thumbnail. Just a timestamp. Click play. The screen stayed black for several seconds. Daniel's face appeared. He looked tired. Nervous. He kept looking over his shoulder, as if someone might walk into the room. He leaned toward the camera, opened his mouth, and said the words that changed my life forever. Dad, if you're watching this, I'm in more danger than you realize. My finger froze over the keyboard. For 8 years, I had dreamed of hearing my son's voice one more time. Now it was happening. But somehow, it felt wrong. Daniel wasn't smiling. His eyes kept darting toward the door behind him. He looked exhausted, terrified. He leaned closer to the camera and spoke quietly. Dad, if you're watching this, then something has gone terribly wrong. I pray I'm still alive. But if I'm not, please don't believe everything you're told about me. My heart pounded so hard I could barely hear the rest. There are people around me I no longer trust. Someone has been stealing money from the company where I work. I found proof. The moment I told the wrong person, everything changed. I sat perfectly still. Stealing money? Daniel had worked as operations manager for a construction supply company. He'd always loved numbers. He handled budgets, payroll, supplier contracts. He wasn't the type to invent stories. If he said something illegal was happening, he had evidence. Daniel reached into his jacket and held up a black folder. Everything is in here. Bank records, contracts, copies of emails. If anything happens to me, take this to the FBI. He lowered the folder out of view, then looked directly into the camera. Dad, don't trust people just because they're family. Sometimes, the people closest to you hurt you the most. The video suddenly glitched. Static filled the screen. A few seconds later it returned. Daniel looked even more frightened than before. If Olivia tells you I died in an accident. He stopped speaking, looked over his shoulder again. Someone knocked on the door. 3 quick knocks. Daniel whispered, I have to go. Then he looked back at the camera one final time. Protect Ethan. Please. Don't let him grow up believing lies. The screen went black. The file ended. I stared at the monitor, unable to move, unable to breathe. If this video had been recorded before Daniel died, why had he predicted Olivia would say it was an accident? That wasn't coincidence. That was fear. Real fear. I immediately checked the USB again. There were no other videos. Only one folder labeled Documents. Inside were dozens of scanned files. Bank statements. Invoices. Wire transfers. At first, none of it made sense. Then one name kept appearing. Michael Cross. Vice President of Operations. Daniel's direct supervisor. Every suspicious payment, every fake invoice, every missing transfer, led back to Michael. Daniel had highlighted each transaction in red. He'd even written notes in the margins. Fake supplier. Money transferred overseas. Fraud. The total exceeded $3 million. I leaned back in my chair. This wasn't a simple workplace disagreement. Daniel had uncovered organized financial fraud. Then I noticed one final document. An email. Printed and saved. The sender's name made my stomach twist. Olivia Bennett. The message was only 3 lines long. Michael. Daniel knows. We need to talk before he tells anyone. I read it again. And again. There had to be another explanation. Olivia couldn't, could she? For 8 years. I'd believed she was a grieving widow. I'd trusted her completely. I'd sent her $50,000 every January. A total of $400,000. She had never been the victim? I suddenly remembered something strange. The week after Daniel's funeral, Olivia had insisted on cleaning out his home office immediately. She told everyone, "It's too painful to leave everything the way it is." She packed every file, every computer, every notebook. At the time, I thought she was trying to move forward. Now, I wondered if she had been trying to erase evidence. My phone rang. The sudden sound nearly made me jump. It was Ethan. I answered immediately. "Hey, buddy." His voice was barely above a whisper. "Grandpa, did you watch it?" "Yes." Silence. "I'm sorry." "What are you sorry for?" "I wasn't supposed to tell anyone." "Who said that?" Another long silence. Then Ethan whispered something that made every hair on my neck stand up. "Mom says some secrets keep people alive." My grip tightened around the phone. "Ethan, what does that mean?" "I don't know. She says if anyone asks questions, bad things happen." My heart sank. This wasn't just about money anymore. A 10-year-old boy had been taught to fear the truth. "Ethan, I need you to answer one question." "Okay. Has anyone else ever talked to you about your dad?" He hesitated, then quietly said, "Sometimes. A man comes to our house." "What man?" "I don't know his name. He wears expensive suits. He and Mom always argue. They stop talking whenever I walk into the room." "What does he look like?" "Tall. Gray hair. Black SUV." Then Ethan added one final sentence. "Grandpa. He has Dad's watch." I felt sick. Daniel never took that watch off. It had belonged to my father before him. After the funeral, Olivia told me it had been destroyed in the fire. Destroyed. But according to Ethan, someone else was wearing it. After hanging up, I walked into my garage. I opened the blue toolbox one more time. This time I searched every corner, every compartment, every hidden space. Underneath the false bottom, my fingers touched something taped to the metal. A tiny silver key. Attached to it was another handwritten note. Only 4 words. Safe Deposit Box 214. No bank name. No address. Just the number. I stared at it for several seconds. Daniel hadn't hidden one secret. He'd hidden an entire trail. And for the first time in 8 years, I realized something terrifying. My son's death might not have been an accident at all. It might have been planned. And if the people behind it discovered that I now had Daniel's evidence, I might become their next target. That night, I didn't sleep. The tiny silver key sat on my kitchen table beside Daniel's letter. I kept staring at it. Safe Deposit Box 214. No bank. No address. Just a number. Daniel had never done anything without a reason. If he'd hidden this key, then whatever it unlocked had to be important. Very important. At exactly 8 o'clock the next morning, I started calling every bank in Lancaster County. Most of them told me they couldn't confirm whether someone had a safe deposit box. Then around 10:30, an elderly bank manager paused after I described the key. "I'm sorry, sir," she said carefully, "but that key looks very similar to the ones we use here." My pulse jumped. "I'm Daniel Bennett's father." There was silence. Then she quietly replied, "If you're listed as the secondary contact, you'll need to bring identification." I grabbed my coat immediately. The bank was only 15 minutes away. A small brick building I'd driven past hundreds of times. The site. Everything felt strangely normal. People depositing checks. Someone opening a savings account. Children waiting with their parents. Meanwhile, my entire world was falling apart. The manager introduced herself as Karen Mitchell. She studied my driver's license, typed something into her computer, then looked back at me with a surprised expression. "Mr. Bennett, you are listed as the emergency beneficiary." My knees almost gave out. Daniel had planned for this. Years before he died. Karen led me through 2 heavy steel doors into the vault. Rows and rows of metal boxes covered the walls. She stopped in front of one. 214. She inserted the master key. "Your key, please." My hand shook as I slid Daniel's key into the second lock. The box slowly opened. Karen stepped back to give me privacy. Inside was a thick manila envelope. Nothing else. No jeweler. No cash. Just paper. Lots of it. I carried the envelope into the private viewing room. The first document nearly stopped my heart. It was a handwritten journal. Daniel's handwriting. Across the first page were 7 words. "If you're reading this, they got to me." I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, then started reading. The journal covered nearly 6 months. Every page described the same thing. Missing company money. Fake contractors. Forged invoices. Secret meetings after work. Daniel had been documenting everything. Dates. Names. License plates. Even photographs. Then I reached an entry written only 4 days before his death. "Today I finally know who's behind it. It's bigger than I imagined. Michael isn't acting alone. Someone inside my own family has been feeding him information." I stopped reading. Inside my own family? Olivia? No. I refused to believe it. Not yet. Then another envelope slipped from between the pages. Inside were printed photographs. I spread them across the table. The first showed Michael Cross entering a downtown hotel. The second showed him sitting in the lobby. The third made my blood run cold. Michael wasn't alone. He was sitting across from Olivia. They weren't arguing. They were smiling, holding hands. The timestamp on the photo was 3 months before Daniel's accident. I stared at it for what felt like forever. No, this couldn't be happening. I flipped over the next photograph. Olivia and Michael again. Different restaurant. Different day. Same behavior. Then another. And another. Dinner. Walking through a shopping center. Always together. Always when Daniel believed his wife was somewhere else. My chest tightened. 8 years. For 8 years. I'd believed Olivia was grieving. But according to these photographs, she'd been living a completely different life long before Daniel died. Then I noticed something else. A folded business receipt. On the back, Daniel had written one sentence. "If anything happens to me, it wasn't the snow." I felt a chill run through my body. The official report blamed icy roads. Daniel didn't believe that. Neither did I anymore. My phone vibrated. It was Ethan. I answered immediately. "Grandpa." His voice sounded frightened. "Mom's packing." "What do you mean?" "She's putting lots of clothes in suitcases. She keeps saying we're leaving." "When?" "I don't know. She told me not to tell anyone." My stomach dropped. Leaving? Had she somehow discovered that I'd found Daniel's evidence? Then Ethan whispered something else. "That man is here again." "Michael." It had to be Michael. "They're arguing," Ethan said quietly. "I heard Mom say." Richard knows. Every muscle in my body went tense. She knew. Or at least, she suspected. I looked down at Daniel's journal. Then at the photographs. If Olivia realized I'd found this evidence, she wouldn't wait. She'd disappear. And she'd take Ethan with her. I stood up so quickly the chair nearly tipped over. Karen looked through the glass door. "Mr. Bennett, are you all right?" I took a deep breath. "No, I don't think I am." I placed every document carefully back inside the envelope, locked the safe deposit box, and walked toward the exit. For 8 years, I'd been sending Olivia £50,000 every January because I believed she was protecting my grandson. Now, I realized something horrifying. I hadn't been supporting my family. I'd been financing the people who destroyed it. As I stepped outside the bank, a black SUV rolled slowly past the entrance. The driver wore dark sunglasses. He didn't stop. He didn't wave. He simply looked directly at me. Before driving away, I had seen that face before. In Daniel's photographs. It was Michael Cross. And now, he knew I was asking questions. I didn't drive home. Instead, I drove straight to the FBI field office in Philadelphia. Daniel's journal, the photographs, the USB drive, the bank records, everything sat inside a leather briefcase on the passenger seat. Every mile I kept asking myself one question. What if I'm already too late? An FBI special agent named Laura Mitchell listened without interrupting. For nearly 2 hours, I told her everything. The annual payments, Ethan's hidden letter, Daniel's video, the safe deposit box, the photographs of Olivia and Michael together. When I finished, she remained silent for several seconds. Then she opened Daniel's journal. Within minutes, her expression changed. "This isn't speculation," she said. "This is evidence." She called another agent into the room. Then another. Soon 3 investigators were reviewing Daniel's files. One of them looked up and quietly said, "We've been investigating Michael Cross for financial crimes for almost 6 years." My heart stopped. "You already knew about him?" "We suspected him. But we never had enough evidence." He tapped Daniel's journal. "Your son just gave us everything we needed." Less than an hour later, the FBI asked me one question. "Can you convince Olivia to meet you tomorrow?" I already knew the answer. She still believed I knew nothing. She still thought I was the trusting old father-in-law who never asked questions. I simply sent her a text. "I'd like to discuss increasing Ethan's annual fund. Meet me tomorrow at noon." She replied in less than 2 minutes. Of course. The next morning, I arrived early at a quiet cafe. Hidden across the street, unmarked FBI vehicles waited. Inside the cafe, small cameras had already been installed. At exactly noon, Olivia walked in. She smiled. The same smile I'd trusted for 8 years. She hugged me. "Richard, it's so good to see you." For a moment, I almost believed she was the woman I'd known. Then I remembered Daniel's handwriting. "Don't trust everyone." We ordered coffee. She immediately started talking about Ethan's education, private school, summer camps, future university expenses. Then she smiled. "You've always been so generous." I looked her straight in the eyes. I found Daniel's letter. Everything changed. Her smile disappeared instantly. Color drained from her face. "I don't know what you're talking about." "I found the video too." Silence. Then I quietly placed one photograph on the table. Michael, holding her hand. Taken months before Daniel died. She stared at it. Neither of us spoke. Finally, she whispered, "Where did you get that?" The question isn't where I got it. The question is, why did you lie to me for 8 years? Tears filled her eyes. For one brief second, I thought she might finally tell the truth. Instead, she reached for her handbag, stood up, and hurried toward the exit. Before she reached the door, 2 FBI agents stepped in front of her. "Olivia Bennett. Federal agents. We need you to come with us." She froze. The cafe fell completely silent. At the same moment, other agents arrested Michael Cross outside his office. Search warrants were executed. Computers seized. Bank accounts frozen. By sunset, the entire fraud operation had begun collapsing. Millions of dollars in stolen company funds were traced through shell companies and fake contracts. Daniel had been telling the truth all along. During questioning, Olivia finally confessed. Years earlier, she had started an affair with Michael. When Daniel discovered evidence of financial fraud, he also discovered the affair. Daniel planned to report everything to federal investigators. Michael panicked. According to the investigation, Michael arranged to tamper with Daniel's truck before the snowstorm. The crash that everyone believed was an accident wasn't an accident at all. It was murder. Olivia admitted she never expected Daniel to die. But after the crash, she chose to protect herself instead of telling the truth. For 8 years, she accepted my £50,000 every January, knowing exactly what had happened. Several months later, both Michael Cross and Olivia Bennett stood trial in federal court. The jury listened to Daniel's recordings, read his journal, reviewed every financial document. After only 6 hours of deliberation, the verdict was unanimous. Guilty. Michael received a life sentence without the possibility of parole for murder, conspiracy, and financial fraud. Olivia was convicted of conspiracy, obstruction of justice, fraud, and accessory after the fact. As the judge announced the sentences, she looked toward me for the first time. I felt no satisfaction, only sadness, because justice can punish evil, but it can never bring back the people we lose. Ethan came to live with me shortly afterward. The first few months weren't easy. He woke from nightmares. He rarely smiled. Years of fear don't disappear overnight. One evening, while we were cleaning the garage together, he picked up Daniel's old toolbox. "Grandpa, can we keep this?" I smiled. "It's your father's. It always belonged to you." He carefully placed it on the workbench, exactly where Daniel had left it years before. A year later, we stood together at Daniel's grave. The autumn leaves drifted quietly across the cemetery. Ethan placed a small baseball beside the headstone, his father's favorite. Then he looked at me. "You kept your promise, Grandpa." I wrapped my arm around his shoulder. "No, buddy. I almost failed. It was your courage that saved us." He smiled. The first genuine smile I'd seen in a very long time. Every January now, I still transfer $50,000. But not to Olivia. The money goes directly into Ethan's education trust, exactly as Daniel always wanted. Sometimes, the greatest inheritance isn't money. It's the truth. And sometimes, the smallest hands are brave enough to carry the biggest secrets.